A black chef named Marcus was unjustly fired for no reason by the new head chef from the restaurant where he had worked for years. 6 months later, Marcus returns to the restaurant, and something incredible happens that leaves everybody speechless. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this. While Marcus Hayes, a brilliant and passionate black chef, stood at the glistening stainless steel counter, his ebony hands moved with practiced precision as he cut fresh herbs. The kitchen of El Grand Epicurean hummed with activity commotion surrounding him. But Marcus was in his own entirely focused on the work at hand. The fragrance of boiling sauces and roasting meats filled the air, making Marcus's mouth wet. He smiled to himself, feeling a deep sense of contentment. This was where he belonged. Chef Marcus yelled out Sophie. One of the young line cooks said, "The special tonight is incredible. You've outdone yourself once more." Marcus glanced up, his soft brown eyes crinkling at the corners. "Thank you, Sophie," he said. "But remember that it's a team effort. We all make the magic happen together." Marcus's thoughts was spoken as he spoke, drifted to his ultimate dream of owning his own restaurant. He envisioned a warm and inviting establishment that was filled with the laughter of delighted customers who were enjoying dishes that were prepared from the heart. The thought caused his chest to swell with hope and determination. Just then, the door to the kitchen opened, and Madame Beaumont, a regular, walked in. Her face brightened up as she stuck her head in her face and screamed, "Marcus, you are the master of flavors himself! Marcus, my love, your lobster bisque was so delicious that I just had to come back and tell you in person." Marcus felt his cheeks light up with excitement. Marcus couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as Madame Beaumont chatted with him. This was the reason he loved cooking, the joy it brought to people, the way it could touch their hearts through their taste buds, and the fact that she left Marcus turned his attention to the praise. "Thank you, Madame Beaumont. I'm so glad you enjoyed it." When he returned to his job, his mind was racing with fresh ideas for meals. He took up a ripe tomato, felt its weight in his fingers, and started to slice it with care. One day, he thought to himself, "I'll serve dishes like this in my very own home." Sight, the dream seemed so near that he could almost taste it, as genuine and lively as the sensations he generated every day in this kitchen. The mood in El Grand Epicurean kitchen underwent a dramatic change with the entrance of Mr. Huxley, the new head chef and part owner, his sophisticated culinary skills. Marcus stood tall, his heart racing with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He had prepared his signature dish in the hopes of making a good first impression on the new boss. "Mr. Huxley," Marcus said, extending his hand to the new boss. His shoes clicked against the tile floor as he strode in his crisp white chef's coat, which was a stark contrast to his cold demeanor. Marcus Hayes extended his hand and introduced himself, saying, "It's a pleasure to meet you." Mr. Huxley's eyes raced over Marcus, his gaze lingering on Marcus's dark complexion before landing on the plate in front of him. He disregarded Marcus's outstretched hand and said, "What's this?" with a clipped voice. Marcus gulped hard and tried to keep his grin in place. "This is my specialty dish, sir. It is a combination of classic French cuisine and Caribbean spices. I thought you would be interested in sampling it." Mr. Huxley's lip twisted slightly. "I see well, Mr. Hayes. I'm not sure what you mean." The words hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. He watched as Mr. Huxley turned away without even tasting the dish, addressing the rest of the kitchen staff about his plans for the restaurant. Marcus was here to try experimental dishes. Le Grand Epicurea is known for its classic French cuisine, and that is how it will continue to be called. As Marcus stood there, his plate, which had been meticulously prepared, began to get chilly. The exhilaration that he had experienced only a few minutes before began to disappear, and it was replaced with a sinking sensation in his stomach. He couldn't help but wonder if Mr. Huxley's dismissal was about more than simply the cuisine, as the other chef said. Marcus carefully disposed of his unfinished masterpiece while listening to Mr. Huxley's lecture on the importance of tradition and quality. He attempted to concentrate on Mr. Huxley's words, but his thoughts kept going back to the icy expression that appeared in the eyes of the new chef for the very first time since he began working at El Grande Epicuria. Marcus felt out of place in the kitchen that he had grown to love. In the days that followed Mr. Huxley's arrival, the kitchen of El Grande Epicureum began to change. Although the changes were subtle at first, Marcus couldn't help but notice the shifts in his schedule. He found himself working more lunch shifts rather than the bustling shifts that he had been used to. Supper service he was accustomed to one day, as Marcus prepared for the lunch rush. He overheard Mr. Huxley chatting to another chef. "We need to concentrate on classic tastes." Mr. Huxley said no more of this fusion rubbish. Marcus's heart dropped, but he kept his head down and continued working. Marcus remarked to Sarah, one of the line cooks, while they were cleaning up after a shift. "Have you noticed how Mr. Huxley has been treating you lately?" Marcus hesitated, a knot building in his stomach. His attempt to provide comments throughout the process of menu planning was unsuccessful, since Mr. Huxley would either cut him off or just dismiss his opinion. His throat, "I'm sure it's nothing," he said, forcing a smile. "Yoon's just settling in. You know," Sarah frowned. "It doesn't seem right. You're one of our best chefs, thanks." Sarah, Marcus responded, affected by her concern. "But don't worry about me, I'm okay." Marcus was a little concerned about her. Marcus attempted to maintain a happy attitude despite the rising dread in his gut. As the weeks went by, more of Marcus's co-workers voiced their concern. They saw how Mr. Huxley disregarded Marcus's suggestions and kept him away from the most critical dishes. Marcus was convinced that everything would work out. Threw himself into his work, preparing each dish with care and passion, even if it was just a simple lunch salad. Marcus told himself each morning as he tied on his apron, "I just need to keep doing my best." However, as he watched Mr. Huxley praise other chefs for dishes that were significantly less creative than his own, Marcus realized that his work would speak for itself. Marcus was at his station carefully plating his signature dish, which was a modern twist on coq au vin, as he put the finishing touches on it. The vibrant dinner service at LR Epicura was in full swing, and the kitchen was buzzing with activity as chefs and line cooks worked in perfect harmony. Marcus couldn't help but wonder how long he would be able to keep his optimism alive. The dish, Mr. Huxley approached the head chef, whose eyes furrowed as he assessed Marcus's work. "What is this?" Mr. Huxley shouted, his voice piercing through the commotion in the kitchen. Marcus stood erect, with pride clear in his voice. "It's my take on coq au vin," Mr. Huxley said. All eyes moved to Marcus and Mr. Huxley, but Sir Marcus continued with voice calm despite the anguish that was rising up in his chest. "Customers are raving about it, and Mr. Huxley's face is contorted in disgust. This is not a coq au vin, it is an abomination." The kitchen became quiet. "Because I've been creating this meal for years. It's one of our most popular dishes. It doesn't matter how popular it is." Mr. Huxley stopped his voice and said, "Rising, this is not what we serve at El Aran Epicurean. This is a respectable French restaurant, not some trendy fusion restaurant." Marcus felt his cheeks get heated as Mr. Huxley proceeded to berate him in front of the whole kitchen crew. He noted the pitying stares from his colleagues, as well as the surprised expressions on the faces of the younger staff members. As Mr. Huxley's tirade continued, Marcus started to see beyond the situation. The phrases that he saw, the manner in which Mr. Huxley's eyes never quite met his, and the manner in which his motions were overdone and even performative. It was as if Mr. Huxley was putting on a show, but Marcus suddenly had an epiphany. It was like a punch to the gut, and it wasn't just about the food. Mr. Huxley's actions, his consistent dismissal of Marcus's ideas, and the way he'd been slowly pushing Marcus to the sidelines, all pointed to something deeper. Something that Marcus had hoped he wouldn't have to face in this kitchen, which he had come to define as his home. Mr. Huxley stormed out, leaving Marcus standing alone with his monster of a meal. Marcus felt a combination of emotions flood over him. Anger, pain, and disappointment swirled in his chest. But behind it all, a resolve started to ignite. He wouldn't allow Mr. Huxley's prejudices define him or his. As Marcus returned home that evening, his shoulders were slouched and his eyes were heavy with worry. As he walked through the door, the reassuring aroma of Angela's homemade lasagna filled the air. However, even the promise of his favorite meal was not enough to lift his spirits. Angela emerged from the kitchen, her warm smile fading as she saw the problem. There was a look of anguish on her husband's face, and she asked him, "What's wrong, honey?" Marcus fell into a chair at the dining table and ran his palm over his face. "It's Mr. Huxley," he replied, his voice hardly rising over pause. Marcus recalled the events of the evening, Mr. Huxley's, whispering that things are getting worse first at the restaurant. Angela sat by him, holding his hand in hers, and softly urging him to tell her everything. Marcus heaved a heavy sigh. The public humiliation, the startled expressions on his co-workers' faces, the rising tension in the kitchen as he talked, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and pain. I think it's because I'm black." Angela Marcus eventually acknowledged, his eyes finding hers. "I'm the only black person in the room. The chef in that kitchen and Mr. Huxley treat me differently. It's almost as if he's seeking for ways to force me out." Angela's hold on his palm tightened, and her eyes shone with compassion and a passionate protectiveness. "Oh, Marcus," she whispered, "I'm so sorry you're going through this. But you listen to me," she continued, her voice becoming more powerful. "You are an incredible talent, your food is amazing, and you have every right to be in that kitchen." Marcus nodded, drawing strength from the words of his wife. "I know, but there are times when I wonder if I should be there. You have worked so hard to reach where you are, and Angela urged that you shouldn't allow Mr. Huxley's biases take that away from you." She cued his face in her hands and locked her eyes on his. "You are strong, Marhays, and you are not going to let him take that away from you. Just a great chef. You're a good man with a beautiful heart that's worth more than any fancy title or restaurant." A small smile tugged at Marcus's lips. "What would I do without you?" he murmured. Angela leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his forehead. "You'll never have to find out we're in this together. Remember now. Let's eat some lasagna and figure out how we are going to show Mr. Huxley just how wrong he is." As they settled in for dinner, Marcus felt a renewed sense of determination with Angela by his side. He knew he could face whatever challenges lay ahead at LR Epicurean as the days passed. Mr. Huxley's was having a difficult time. When Marcus arrived at work one morning, he saw the other chefs clustered around Mr. Huxley, deep in conversation over the following week's menu. The tension in the kitchen of El Grand Epicurean thickened like an over-reduced sauce until it became cloying and unpleasant. Marcus's treatment became more overt. As Marcus arrived, the talk was immediately stopped. Mr. Huxley's icy eyes briefly glanced over Marcus before he moved back to the group. As I was saying, Mr. Huxley continued to ignore Marcus, pointing out that he would be introducing a new tasting menu in the near future. "Week. I've already allocated the dishes to each of you." Marcus cleared his throat. "Excuse me, Mr. Huxley. What would you want me to make?" Mr. Huxley's lip twisted slightly. "Oh, Marcus, I didn't see you there. You may continue with your normal station. We won't be requiring any of your unique ideas. What would you like me to cook?" As the days progressed, Marcus glanced around at his co-workers in the hopes of finding a welcoming face or a sign of support. However, he was greeted with averted gazes and uncomfortable shuffling. The comments hurt like salt in a wound. Marcus looked around at his co-workers. Marcus was finding himself increasingly isolated. It seemed that important meetings about menu changes or VIP guests always seemed to take place when he was absent. His suggestions were dismissed without consideration, and his expertise was ignored. What hurt even more was the growing distance between Marcus and his fellow chefs, people whom he had once considered friends, but who he now barely met. Eyes' conversations would stop when he entered the break room, only to resume in hushed tones once he left. One afternoon, Marcus overheard two of his co-workers whispering in the walk-in refrigerator. One of them said, "I feel bad for Marcus, but what can we do if we stick up for him? We might be next on Mr. Huxley's chopping block." "I know," the other one replied. "I know." Marcus gently turned away from the situation, his heart heavy. He understood their apprehension, but the thought that he was now alone in this struggle weighed on him like a lead apron on the night of the high-profile event. He sighed hard and said, "It's not right, but I can't risk losing this job. I have a family to support." Laurent Epicurean was buzzing with excitement when the day came. The restaurant was packed with the city's elite, including food reviewers, celebrities, and key business leaders. It was the ideal chance for Marcus to showcase his extraordinary culinary skills, but Mr. Huxley had other plans. While the kitchen crew was gathering for their pre-service meeting, Mr. Huxley distributed assignments. "Pierre, you will be in charge of the appetizers. Sarah, you will be responsible for the main dishes. And Marcus," Mr. Huxley halted his gaze. Marcus felt as if he had been slapped dish duty on one of the most important evenings of the year. He opened his lips to protest, but Mr. Huxley had already spoken. He was shining with barely veiled scorn. "Tonight you will be on dish duty and prep work." Marcus took his place at the sink as he scrubbed pots and pans. He could hear the excited chatter of the guests and the clinking of silverware. The aromas of exquisite dishes that he had prepared wafted through the kitchen. Marcus had already moved on to discussing the evening's special menu items, many of which he had helped develop. Marcus's heart was heavy as he did this. A bitter reminder of what he was missing throughout the night, Marcus observed as Mr. Huxley paraded around the dining room, taking plaudits for dishes that Marcus had envisioned. The seared scallops with truffle foam. Oh yes, a personal invention Mr. Huxley boasted to a food critic, were among the dishes that Mr. Huxley praised. Despite the injustice of the situation, Marcus continued his job tirelessly, making sure that every pot was immaculate and every vegetable was neatly diced. Even though he was in a lowly function, he was determined to keep his dignity, and he did not forget that he had been the one who had first proposed the meal. Professionalism as the night progressed, Marcus's dissatisfaction increased, but so did his determination. He may be pushed to the background for the time being, but he understood his value, and he refused to allow Mr. Huxley's actions reduce his enthusiasm for cooking or his aspirations of establishing his own restaurant. When Marcus arrived to the restaurant early the next day, his heart was sad, but his determination was strong. He knew that he could not allow Mr. Huxley's unjust treatment to continue any longer. As the kitchen crew bustled about getting ready for the day ahead, Marcus took a deep breath and approached Mr. Huxley. Marcus inquired with a firm voice, "Mr. Huxley, may I have a word with you?" Despite the fear that was churning in his gut, Mr. Huxley turned his eyebrows up in surprise and asked, "What is it?" "Marcus, we are pretty busy as you can see." Marcus held his ground. "I believe it is necessary that we talk this now, sir." The kitchen suddenly became silent. The staff sensed the tension in the air. All eyes looked to Marcus and Mr. Huxley very well. Mr. Huxley stated his tone of voice. "I think it is vital that we discuss this now. Snip, speak your mind." Marcus took another deep breath. "Mr. Huxley, I've been finding a trend in way I'm being treated here. I feel I'm encountering discrimination because of my race." A collective gasp rang through the kitchen. Mr. Huxley's face rend his. "Marcus, your eyes narrowing. That is a very serious claim. What gives you the idea that you have been continually undermining my job?" Sir Marcus added, his voice rising firmer. "That you have assigned me to less important responsibilities, neglected my input, and even taken credit for my work. It is impossible for me not to notice that I am the only black chef in this establishment, and I am the only one who is being treated in this manner." The members of the kitchen staff exchanged awkward looks with one another, and some of them shook their heads in agreement. Others glanced away, embarrassed that they hadn't spoken out sooner. Huxley's face distorted with rage. "How dare you make such allegations? I've done nothing but maintain the high standards of this institution. If you can't manage the strain, maybe you're not made out for this kitchen." Marcus stood tall and unmoved in the face of Mr. Huxley's fury. "I can't believe you're going to do that." "Bear the pressure, sir. What I can't handle is being treated unfairly. I am a skilled chef, and I deserve the same respect and opportunity as everyone else in this room." The tension in the kitchen was evident, and everyone was holding their breath as they waited to see how this confrontation would play out. Unfold. Mr. Huxley's face turned an even deeper shade of red as he glared at Marcus. The kitchen staff watched in stunned silence, the air thick with tension. "That's enough," Mr. Huxley bellowed, his voice echoing off the stainless steel surfaces. "I will not stand here and be accused of discrimination in my own." Marcus kept his ground, his eyes locked with Mr. Huxley's gaze. "I'm simply asking for fair treatment," Marcus said. "I'll show you fair treatment that you're fired. Pack your things and get out of my kitchen." Mr. Huxley laughed. "I'll show you fair treatment." There was an instant collective gasp that reverberated across the kitchen. Marcus felt as if he had been hit in the gut. The shock of the unexpected dismissal left him temporarily speechless. "You can't do that," one of the sous chefs mumbled. But Mr. Huxley hushed him with a stern glance. Marcus took a deep breath and fought back the tears that were on the verge of falling out of his eyes. He glanced about at his co-workers, some of whom averted his stare. Others looked on with a great deal of pity. Marcus spoke his words in a voice that was barely above a whisper. He then slowly untied his apron and laid it on the counter. He walked to his locker with as much dignity as he could muster in order to gather his personal belongings. The kitchen remained eerily quiet as Marcus gathered his things. He could feel the weight of everyone's stares on his back. As he turned to leave, he caught sight of the dish that he had been working on earlier, which was a testament to his passion and skill. However, it was abandoned with one person. Last look at the location that had served as his second home for many years. Marcus walked out of the kitchen. The heavy door swung shut behind him with a final thud as Marcus stepped out into the crisp morning air. The realization of what had just occurred began to sink in his career. At LR Epicurean was over the job he had poured his heart and soul into. Marcus stood outside yet another restaurant with his shoulders slumped in defeat. The no hiring sign in the window mocked him, serving as a stark reminder of the fact that he had lost his heart and soul in an instant. As he walked to his car, thoughts raced through his mind about how he would support Angela and their children, what he would tell them, and where he would go from here. After innumerable rejections over the previous 2 weeks, he let out a heavy sigh, his chef's resume clenched tightly in his fist. "This can't be happening," he whispered to himself, his voice barely heard over the noisy street in the city as Marcus walked by. As he went home, his mind was racing with stress because expenses were building up. Angela had been so supportive, but he could see the fear in her eyes. He needed to find job, and quickly. The next morning, Marcus found himself starring at a little diner that was located on the corner of their street. The Faded. There was a help-wanted poster in the window that appeared to pull him with a sad heart. He pushed open the door, and the owner of the diner, a kind-hearted lady named Betty, informed him that he was overqualified for the work. However, if you want the job, it is yours. Marcus swallowed his pride and accepted the position. Marcus found himself flipping burgers and cooking ordinary sandwiches the next week. The task was a long cry from the fancy foods he used to prepare, but he pushed himself into it with determination. "Order up," he called, slipping. It was a challenge for him, but he managed to get through it. One of the customers, a regular called Joe, took a mouthful of the eggs and bacon that was placed across the counter. He grinned and remarked, "These are the best eggs I've had here in years." Marcus gave him a thumbs up, despite the fact that he felt a little uncomfortable with the comment. Pang in his heart, he missed the creativity and challenge of gourmet dining. During his breaks, he would write down recipe ideas in a little notebook, striving to keep his culinary talents strong. One quiet day, Betty spotted Marcus tinkering with the diner's limited resources to create a dish that was one of a kind. "The sauce for the meatloaf special that smells great," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with surprise. Marcus grinned shyly, just trying something new as he mixed the sauce. Marcus felt a familiar spark of passion erupt within him. At that moment, he may be working in a little diner today, but his love for cooking is still strong, was far from extinguished, and he was resolved to find his way back to the world of fine cuisine no matter how long it took. Marcus wiped down the counter at the diner, lost in thought about his next shift. The bell that was hanging above the door chimed, and he looked up to see a woman in her mid-40s enter the room with her eyes searching the space. Marcus approached the lady in a nice manner. "Can I help you?" The woman's face brightened up and she asked, "Are you Marcus Hayes?" Ed Marcus answered, "Yes, that's me. I'm Sarah from the Oakwood Community Center." While extending her hand, she continued, "I've heard wonderful things about your cooking." Marcus shook her hand with a mixture of appreciation and satisfaction. "Thank you." Sarah smiled brightly and asked what I could do for you. "We are planning a charity cook-off for the next month to generate money for our after-school programs, and we would be thrilled if you could take part in it." Marcus's eyes were filled with a mixture of interest and apprehension. The mention of a cook-off caused Marcus's heart to skip a beat, but uncertainty rapidly crept in. "I am grateful for the offer, but I am not sure if I am the proper person for this folly. Sarah maintained that your name precedes you, and that having you there would truly attract attention to our cause." Marcus paused, his thoughts racing. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table staring at the poster. Angela observed his attention and sat alongside him. Sarah said, with conflicting emotions, "Can I think about it, of course?" and handed him a flyer. "Please do, we'd be honored to have you," she said. Her gently asked, "What's on your mind, honey?" Marcus sighed and explained about the invitation, saying, "I don't know if I should do it. What if I'm not good enough anymore?" Angela took his hand, her eyes filled with love and encouragement. "Marcus, your talent didn't disappoint. Vanished just due to the fact that you are employed at a restaurant. This might be an excellent opportunity. But what if Angela interrupted you? You are a fantastic chef, and here is your moment to remind everyone, including yourself, of that fact." Marcus felt a little grin tugging at his lips. "You truly believe I should do it?" "Totally," Angela reinforced. "And I'll be there cheering you on every step of the way." The next day, Marcus's friend and old colleague Tom dropped by the establishment. Tom's eyes lighted up when Marcus mentioned the cook-off, and he screamed, "Man, you've got to do it." Marcus felt a familiar exhilaration rising up in his chest as he thought about the possibility of producing something really spectacular. Tom's eyes brightened up when Marcus mentioned the cook-off. It was becoming more enticing for him to share his enthusiasm with other people. "You know what," Marcus said, a newfound resolve in his voice. "I believe I will." Marcus stood in his modest kitchen at home, surrounded by a variety of ingredients. The worktops were littered with spices, fresh vegetables, and other items. Marcus felt a spark of joy that he hadn't had in months as he started to chop vegetables. The rhythmic sound of the knife striking the cutting board was like music to his ears. He took a deep breath and inhaled the familiar sensation that had always provided him peace. After that, he continued to chop veggies. Marcus's thoughts strayed to his grandmother's cuisine, and he recalled the rich, hearty tastes of her gumbo. He also recalled the way that she had lovingly taught him her secret skills, which motivated him to decide to make his own. He found himself humming gently, and a grin played at the corners of his lips. A cuisine that paid homage to his heritage while including his own contemporary twist hours went by as Marcus experimented with various flavor combinations. He tasted modified and improved his creation, the kitchen filled with enticing aromas that made Angela peek in suspiciously. "Smells fantastic in here." She felt like she was in heaven. She exclaimed, her eyes glistening with delight at the sight of her husband so immersed in his passion. Once again, Marcus glanced up with a beaming smile and added, "I think I've got something special here. Angie, want to try it?" As Angela savored the bite, her eyes widened. "Oh, Marcus," she breathed. "This is it." Incredible. Her reaction filled Marcus with a warmth that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He realized how much he'd missed this feeling, the satisfaction of creating something truly delicious, and the satisfaction of sharing his art with others. Over the course of the next few days, Marcus continued to practice and refine his dish. He would wake up early and jot down ideas that came to him. Marcus felt his confidence building with each passing day, and the worry that had plagued him ever since he lost his position at LR Epicurean started to ebb away. He would jot notes on napkins while he worked his shifts at the diner. He was anxious to test out new flavor combinations when he got home. As Marcus stood in his kitchen, putting the final touches on his meal, he had a deep realization. Cooking was not just his profession, it was a part of who he was. No matter where life took him, this passion would always be there, ready to be rekindled. This realization was the beginning of a renewed sense of purpose. On the day of the charity cook-off, Marcus awoke early, his pulse hammering with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He meticulously packed his materials and equipment, double-checking everything before going out. As he entered the crowded community center, Marcus was struck by the fact that the cook-off was finally here. The energy in the air, the room was filled with the sounds of sizzling pans, chopping knives, and excited chatter. Competitors from all walks of life were setting up their stations, each hoping to impress the judges and the crowd. Marcus took a deep breath and began to set up his own station. He arranged his ingredients with care, his hands moving. Marcus lost himself in the rhythm of cooking, moving with grace and confidence, his inventiveness showing through in every dish he produced. And he did it with the practiced precision of a seasoned chef. As he worked, he felt a feeling of peace wash over him, and he knew that here was where he belonged. This was where the competition started. As the judges made their rounds, Marcus presented his dishes with pride, explaining the inspiration behind each creation and sharing anecdotes of his experiences. The aromas that were wafting from his station drew inquisitive bystanders who watched in fascination as he deftly mixed tastes in surprising ways. The judges listened attentively, their eyes widening as they sampled his meal. "This is remarkable," one judge cried, unable to contain her excitement. "The flavors are so old yet perfectly balanced. It's like nothing I've ever tasted." His grandmother's cuisine and his own culinary journey were the topics of discussion. Before the throng that gathered around Marcus's station became bigger as news spread about his remarkable meals, people anxiously waited for samples while enthusiastically conversing among themselves about the talented chef. It was then that they found Marcus felt a warmth flowing through his chest as he stared at the food. Out at the sea of joyful faces for the first time in months, he felt really seen and appreciated for his abilities. The sorrow and doubt that had plagued him ever since he lost his job at LR Epicurean started to ebb away, and they were replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and optimism as the event drew to a close. Close Marcus found himself surrounded by well-wishers and new fans. People praised his creativity, asked for recipes, and inquired about where they could taste more of his cooking. The positive reception overwhelmed Marcus, filling him with gratitude and joy as the crowd began to disperse. Marcus noticed a lady who was well-dressed approached his station. Her sharp eyes surveyed the leftovers of his dishes, and a grin danced on her lips. Marcus knew her instantly. It was Evelyn Wright, one of the most renowned culinary reviewers in the city. "Mr. Hayes," Evelyn remarked, offering her hand to him. Her hand, "I must say that your dishes today were simply outstanding." Marcus's heart skipped a beat as he shook her hand. "Thank you, Miss Wright. I'm delighted that you liked them." Evelyn's eyes gleamed with excitement. "I must say that enjoyed is an understatement." Marcus felt a knot develop in his throat. He hadn't anticipated such a deep comprehension of his work. "I've heard about your latest work. Your flavors tell a tale, Mr. Hayes. It's a story about passion, heritage, and perseverance." As Evelyn continued, her tone becoming more kind, "It is a shame when talent like yours is stifled by prejudice and narrow-mindedness." Marcus nodded, unable to find the words to express his feelings, since the recollection of his rejection from LR Epicurean still lingered in his mind. Evelyn's tone brightened as she added, I saw a chef who refuses to be defined by setbacks. She stopped to observe Marcus's face before continuing. Mr. Hayes, your creativity and skill deserve a proper showcase. Have you ever considered launching your business? Marcus's eyes widened as he said, It's been a dream of mine for years, but nothing has allowed it to become a reality. Evelyn stopped him softly and said, I believe in your talent, Mr. Hayes, and I'd like to help make that dream a reality. Marcus felt as if the earth had been turned below him, moved under his feet. So you want to help me start a restaurant? Evelyn nodded, her grin widening. I have contacts in the business, and I'm always on the lookout for new talent to support your cuisine. Your narrative, they need to be shared. With the world, tears began to fill up in Marcus's eyes as the weight of Evelyn's offer began to sink in. This was more than just a chance at a new employment. It was an opportunity for him to demonstrate that he could share his passion on his own terms. Miss Ari, I don't know what to say. Marcus stuttered, overwhelmed by the news. Feeling Evelyn put a soothing touch on his shoulder, said, Okay, Mr. Hayes, let's develop something wonderful together. Marcus's hands shook as he opened the door to his flat. His mind was racing, repeating every word of his chat with Evelyn right as. When he entered, Angela glanced up from her book, her eyes widening at the sight of her husband's hot face. Marcus, what happened? She questioned, placing her book aside. Marcus took a long breath and tried to control his voice. Angela, you won't be able to hold your tongue. Angela's eyebrows came up as she heard the food critic remark. What did she say? She wants to help me open my own restaurant. Marcus stated, his voice barely above a whisper. Angela's mouth fell for a second to the point where she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Room was silence. Suddenly she sprang from her seat and flung her arms around Marcus, tears of excitement flowing down her face. Oh, Marcus, that's great. She cried, her voice muffled against his chest. As they held, Marcus felt the weight of the last few months begin to lift. He pulled back slightly and looked into Angela's eyes. It's everything we've dreamed of, but it's also terrifying. What if I'm not ready? Angela cued his face in her hands, her eyes filled with love and determination. Marcus Hayes, you were born ready, and this is your moment. Over the next few days, Marcus and Angela will be together. Angela spent every free time preparing. They sat at their little kitchen table, surrounded by notebooks loaded with ideas, drawings of various restaurant layouts, and lists of possible menu items. One evening, Angela recommended that they give roots and wings a try. She did this by tapping her pen. Marcus's face lit up as he answered, That's perfect, Angela. It's exactly what I want the restaurant to be about. As they worked, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose, and the pain of his dismissal from El Grand Epicurean began to begin. Against her chin, it represents your connection to your heritage and your ability to soar to new heights. To be replaced by excitement for the future with Angela by his side and Evelyn's support, he felt invincible. You know, Marcus said softly one night as they were getting ready for bed, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm almost grateful for what happened with Mr. Huxley. If I hadn't been fired, I might have been able to do this. Angela smiled and squeezed his hand as she said, You've always had the talent, Marcus, and now the world is finally going to see it. Evelyn Wright's reputation in the culinary world opened doors that Marcus had only dreamed of before she arranged a meeting with potential investors at a sleek downtown office, and Marcus found out that he was going to be able to see his talent. Evelyn started her speech with confidence and warmth, saying, I'd like to introduce you to Marcus Hayes, a chef with extraordinary talent and vision. Marcus took a deep breath and said, I'd like to introduce you to Marcus Hayes. Marcus was standing in front of a group of well-dressed business people. His hands were slightly trembling as he grasped his portfolio. Marcus began to speak, his voice becoming more powerful with each word. He shared his journey, his passion for cooking, and his dream of opening a restaurant that would honor his roots while pushing the boundaries of culinary innovation. As he spoke, Marcus could see the interest growing in the eyes of the investors, one of whom was a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, who leaned in closer to him. Marcus's face lighted up as he presented his idea for Roots and Wings, which is a blend of classic soul cuisine and contemporary methods. He continued, his eyes flashing with enthusiasm. "I want to tell you more about your concept. Mr. Hayes, your passion is clear. Tell us more about your concept. Make foods that remind people of home while surprise them with new tastes." The investors nodded approvingly, and by the conclusion of the meeting they had agreed to offer the capital Marcus required. As they exited the office, Evelyn patted Marcus's shoulder. "You did it, Marcus. Your dream is becoming a..." The fact was that over the course of the following few weeks, Marcus immersed himself in planning. He would spend hours in his home kitchen, which was quite tiny, trying with different recipes and writing down ideas. Angela would often find him there late at night, surrounded by pots and pans, with a look of great concentration on his face. "Try this," he said to her one evening, handing her a spoonful of a rich and aromatic stew. "It's my grandmother's recipe, but I've added a twist," he continued. Anna's eyes widened as she tasted it. "Marcus, this is really amazing," Marcus said, his chest overflowing with pride. Mark felt a profound sense of gratitude as the idea for Roots and Wings began to take shape. He thought of all the people who had supported him, including Angela, Evelyn, and the investors who believed in him. He knew that he was on the right track. Each dish that he created was a piece of his story, a blend of his past and his hopes for the future. During the time that Marcus's plans for Roots and Wings were beginning to take shape, word of his comeback spread through the city's culinary grapevine. The news traveled quickly, reaching the ears of his former colleagues and customers from LR Epicurean. Their faith in his abilities had given him the courage to spread his wings and fly. On a bright and beautiful day, while Marcus was evaluating prospective sites for his new restaurant, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sophie, a sous chef. Many people were astonished and happy to learn that Marcus was making a victorious comeback to the culinary scene. When Marcus received the letter, he felt a warmth run through his chest. He hadn't realized how much he had missed the camaraderie of his previous workplace. He had worked closely with the chef at Elrun Epicurean. "Marcus had just heard about your new restaurant. I am very thrilled for you. You deserve this opportunity to shine." Kitchen team throughout the day. Additional messages poured in from other former colleagues, line cook servers, and even the pastry chef who had always admired Marcus's creativity. Later that week, while Marcus was grocery shopping for ingredients to test new recipes, he ran into Mr. and Mrs. Goldstein, who were regular customers of LR. Marcus was able to meet them. An Epicurean who had always complimented his food. "Marcus, my darling kid," Mrs. Goldstein cried with a flash of delight. "We've missed your wonderful dishes. Is it true that you're opening your own place?" Marcus nodded, a bashful grin spreading over his face. A smile spread over his face as he said, "Yes, ma'am. It's called Roots and Wings, and I'm hoping to open it in a few months." Mr. Goldstein patted him on the back and said, "We'll be first in line, son. Your food has always had heart, and it will be good to taste it again." The words of Mr. Goldstein lingered with him. Marcus realized that despite the difficulties he had encountered, he had made a lasting impact on people through his cooking as he continued to work on his restaurant plans. This realization came to him long after they had parted ways. Their enthusiasm and the support from his former colleagues filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. Marcus got an unexpected email from Jean-Luc, the head chef at El Grand Epicurean. Jean-Luc volunteered to assist Marcus in compiling a wine list for Roots and Wings that would be an ideal complement to his one-of-a-kind menu. As construction on Roots and Wings started, Marcus found himself at a loss for what to do. The center of a whirlwind of activity, each day brought new decisions to make and challenges to overcome. But for Marcus, each obstacle was just another opportunity to pour his heart and soul into his dream. From the crack of dawn until well past sunset, Marcus was on site overseeing every detail of the restaurant's creation, and he worked closely with the people who were responsible for it. With the architects and designers making sure that the space would reflect the warmth and originality of his cuisine. "I want the dining area to feel like home." Marcus said to the interior designer that his eyes were glowing with enthusiasm, but also like an adventure. He asked if it was possible to combine warm wood tones with flashes of color. Brilliant color. The designer nodded feverishly and scribbled notes quickly as Marcus detailed his vision. Together they picked rich mahogany tables and colorful artwork inspired by African culture for the walls, creating a room that was both welcoming and inspiring in the kitchen. Marcus was even more excited about the project. Hands-on, he painstakingly selected each piece of equipment, from the state-of-the-art ovens to the handcrafted chef's knives, and every tool had to meet his exacting standards. Marcus told Angela one evening as they reviewed the kitchen plans that it is not just about cooking. Rather, it is about creating an experience with each dish that is served. Leaves this kitchen will carry a piece of my story, but bringing his vision to life wasn't without its challenges. Construction delays threatened to push back the opening date, and unexpected costs began to work their way into their budget. Marcus found himself staying up late many nights poring over spreadsheets and making decisions. On a particularly stressful day, Marcus was struggling with a shipment of faulty kitchen tiles. He felt the weight of his dream pressing down on him, and doubt began to creep in. He whispered to himself that perhaps he had taken on more than he could handle. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn Wright, the food distributor. Reviewer who had believed in him from the beginning. How is it going? Chef can't wait to see what you're cooking up. Those simple words of encouragement were enough to spark Marcus's resolve. Marcus squared his shoulders and dove back into the task, attacking each problem with fresh vigor as the reviewer continued to believe in him. As the weeks went by, Marcus's commitment started to pay off, and the restaurant gradually transformed from a construction site into a warm and welcoming place that perfectly represented Marcus's culinary vision. As the opening day of Roots and Wings drew near, excitement swirled about the restaurant. Throughout the city's culinary scene, word had spread about Marcus's new venture, and food enthusiasts eagerly anticipated the flavors and experiences he would bring to the table. Meanwhile, across town, El Grand Epicurean was facing a different kind of buzz. The restaurant, which had been bustling with activity, now stood eerily quiet on the street. The majority of the time, Mr. Huxley would pace the kitchen, his face etched with anxiety as he watched the dining room, which was barely half full. "Where are all of our regulars?" he would murmur to the sous chef, who could only shrug in response. The lack of Marcus's innovative dishes had created a visible void in the restaurant. Mr. Huxley's determination on keeping to traditional recipes failed to thrill the palates of their increasingly diversified clientele. Yet there was a gap in the menu. Customers who had previously raved about the one-of-a-kind fusion of tastes now grumbled about the bland and uninspired options. The warmth and camaraderie that had once filled the kitchen had been replaced by a tense and oppressive environment, and staff members worked in silence because they were afraid to speak up or speak out. It wasn't just the food that was driving customers away. The atmosphere in the restaurant had changed dramatically since Marcus's departure. Suggest new ideas for fear of facing Mr. Huxley's wrath. This negative energy seeped into the dining room where customers could sense the discord. The once attentive service became lackluster, and the overall dining experience suffered as weeks passed. The financial strain on El Grand Epicurean became impossible to ignore. Mr. Huxley found himself gazing at spreadsheets that were filled with red numbers. His hands were trembling as he understood the enormity of the issue. "We can't continue like this." He recognized to himself that the weight of his previous deeds was finally setting in. When culinary writers were formerly generous in their praise for El Grand Epicurea, they suddenly produced harsh reviews that further harmed the restaurant's image. Mr. Huxley's pride stopped this from happening. Customers who had been going to the restaurant for years started looking for fresh dining experiences elsewhere. Him from recognizing the underlying reason of the downturn, he blamed the economy, shifting culinary trends, and even his staff for the difficulties that the restaurant was experiencing. However, a nagging voice reminded him of the talented chef, whom he had driven away on the night of the grand opening, when Roots and Wings were buzzing with excitement. Excitement, the restaurant's warm, inviting atmosphere welcomed guests as they streamed through the doors. Marcus stood in the kitchen, his heart pounding with anticipation and joy. As the first dishes left the kitchen, the dining room filled with exclamations of delight. Marcus's fusion of traditional flavors and modern techniques captivated the Angela, who was beaming with pride, moved among the tables, chatting with guests and basking in the glow of her husband's success. She caught Marcus's eye through the kitchen window and gave him a thumbs up. Flavor buds of every patron the community had turned out in full force to support him, and the rest of the establishment was packed to capacity. In the kitchen, Marcus worked with a renewed enthusiasm. His passion was visible in every dish he created, and his staff, which was inspired by his leadership and innovation, moved in perfect harmony around him. The environment was exciting, full with laughter and camaraderie, and there was a striking contrast between the two. In contrast to the tight atmosphere of El Grand Epicurean, as the evening proceeded, culinary reviewers and local celebrities came, attracted by the hype around the new restaurant. They tried Marcus's distinctive dishes, their eyes enlarging with each mouthful, and talks about the restaurant's menu were taking place. As Mr. Huxley sat alone in his office at LR Epicurea, scanning through social media, his face sank as he watched post after post praising Roots and Wings and its outstanding chef. The innovative cuisine and Marcus's inspirational journey permeated the air across the whole town. Photos of happy customers and appetizing food filled his page, and the reality of what he had lost struck Mr. Huxley like a punch to the body. He thought of the vacant tables in his own restaurant, the diminishing number of bookings and the growing amount of bills. The repercussions of his actions were becoming more severe. Marcus stepped out of the kitchen to address the crowd. As he spoke, the room fell silent. His voice was filled with emotion as he spoke. He thanked everyone for being here tonight. His eyes sparkled as he said, "This restaurant is a dream come true, and it wouldn't be possible without your support." As the weeks turned into months, the restaurant continued to grow. Roots and Wings continued to thrive, and the restaurant evolved into a culinary destination that attracted foodies from all over the city. Beyond Marcus's innovative recipes and warm hospitality kept customers coming back for more, while at the same time, across the city. When Mr. Huxley came at work each day, the formerly busy kitchen now stood silent, serving as a sharp reminder of the awful judgments he had made. The town LR Epicurean was a ghost of its former self, with vacant tables and a skeletal staff greeting him. One evening, Mr. Huxley sat alone in his office pondering over his mistakes. Mounting bills and dwindling bank statements, the reality of his situation hit him hard. Tears welled up in his eyes as he realized he was on the brink of losing everything. His pride and prejudice had cost him not just his best chef, but his entire business, just as despair threatened to overwhelm him. There was a knock at the door. Mr. Huxley quickly wiped his tears and glanced up to discover Marcus standing at the doorway. There was a look of astonishment and embarrassment on Mr. Huxley's face. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" he murmured with a voice that was barely above a whisper. Marcus went into the office, face that is a combination of resolve and compassion. "Mr. Huxley, I've heard about the difficulties that the restaurant is experiencing. I have an offer for you." Mr. Huxley's eyebrows lifted in excitement and amazement after all that has happened. And that had occurred after all of the suffering that he had caused. Marcus was here offering assistance. Marcus took a deep breath and proceeded. "I know we've had our differences, but I believe in second chances. I'm offering to buy El Grand Epicurean and incorporate it into Roots and Wings in order to help you." Mr. Huxley sat in startled silence, astonished by Marcus's unexpected compassion and generosity. The offer was a lifeline that he never imagined he'd get, particularly from the guy he had been dealing with for so long. Marcus would continue on as a consultant, sharing his skills and helping to merge the best of both places. When Mr. Huxley looked at Marcus, his eyes were wide with amazement. The guy whom he had previously disregarded and insulted was now standing before him, giving him a lifeline. It was nearly too much for him to handle. Mr. Huxley, stuttering, his voice thick with confusion, said, "I don't understand. Feeling after all I did to you, why would you want to assist me?" Marcus smiled gently, his eyes filled with compassion, "Because hanging on to anger just harms us both. I've learned that forgiveness can be a powerful thing." He moved closer to Mr. Huxley's desk, his manner calm and collected. He gave me a kind grin. The shoulders of Mr. Huxley sank as he let out a deep sigh. "But while the restaurant is failing, it would be a tragedy to see it shut its doors forever. I think that together, we can breathe new life into it. The El Grand Epicurean has a rich history, and so much promise that it would be a shame to see it close its doors forever." "It's beyond safe." Marcus shook his head, his voice full with determination. "No restaurant is beyond rescuing if you have the proper personnel and the appropriate vision. I see an opportunity here to merge the historic skills that made El Grand Epicurean renowned with the innovative approach we've created." He stopped at roots and wings, giving his words some time to sink in. "I'm offering to buy out your share of the restaurant, Mr. Huxley, but I want you to stay on as a consultant. Your experience and knowledge are invaluable." Mr. Huxley's eyes widened in surprise at the offer, which was more than he could have ever imagined, ever hoped for more than he deserved. He felt a lump develop in his throat as he fought to find the words to react to Marcus. "I don't know what to say." He eventually managed to get his voice barely above a whisper. "Your offer is really generous, particularly given the fact that we are in a position to receive it. I know it's a lot to take in, so take some time to think about it. But know that this offer comes from a position of respect for what L.R. Epicurean once was, and what it may be again." Mr. Huxley glanced down. Marcus nodded, recognizing the weight of the occasion. "I know it's a lot to take in." At his hands, and then back up at Marcus, in that moment he saw not only a talented chef, but also a man of incredible character, and Grace was humbled and grateful. Mr. Huxley made his decision, and he said, "I accept your offer, Marcus," with his voice filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you for giving me and El Grand Epicurean a second chance." Formally, the transaction was finished. Marcus and Mr. Huxley stood in the kitchen of El Grand Epicurean. The formerly busy room was now silent, serving as a harsh reminder of how far the restaurant had fallen. Marcus took a deep breath and scanned the area with his eyes. "Familiar surroundings, Mr. Huxley." Marcus started, his voice calm and steady. "I have a suggestion for you." Mr. Huxley glanced up with a tinge of dread in his eyes. "Yes." Marcus smiled gently. I'd like to offer you something. You have been given the post of head chef here at L.R. Epicurean," and Mr. Huxley's eyes widened in surprise. However, I believed that after all that had happened, Marcus had put out a hand and gently interrupted me. "The past is now in the past. What is important now is the future of our restaurant, and your talents and expertise are what count. Invaluable, and I believe that you have the potential to play a significant part in its revival." He stopped, his countenance becoming more serious. "But I want to make it clear that this restaurant will be handled differently from this point forward. Our focus will be on fostering an environment that is respectful of all employees and respectful of their needs. Atmosphere for everyone." Mr. Huxley nodded slowly as he absorbed Marcus's remarks, which meant that there was no space for the preconceptions or biases that had previously been here. Marcus proceeded by saying that every member of our team, regardless of their background, would be appreciated and given equal opportunity to shine. "Marcus Thai, I don't deserve this compassion. But if you're willing to give me this opportunity, I pledge to do all in my ability to make sure that I am able to make it happen." Mr. Huxley remained silent for a minute, his attention fixated on the glistening worktops. When he glanced up, there were tears in his eyes. While things were going well, Marcus extended his hand and said, "Chef Huxley, welcome aboard. Let's create something amazing together." As the days went by, Mr. Huxley found himself struggling to come to terms with his new position at L.R. Epicurean. The concept of working under Marcus, A guy he had previously treated so kindly was a challenge for him. He couldn't help but feel a pang of anger every time Marcus gave him directions or made modifications to the menu. One busy evening, as the kitchen buzzed with activity, Mr. Huxley observed Marcus expertly manage the staff, his employees. He was seized with a mixture of shame and anxiety on account of his bad performance. It was a dramatic contrast to his own harsh and dictatorial style of leadership, which was characterized by a calm attitude and encouraging words that brought out the best in everyone. Chef Huxley Marcus called out to Samantha, asking if she could assist her with the sauce for the tables. Samantha was having some difficulty obtaining it. As he walked Samantha through the procedure, Mr. Huxley was astonished to discover that he was enjoying the connection. The young chef's eyes lighted up with comprehension, and her thankfulness was obvious. Mr. Huxley pondered for a while before nodding and making his way to Samantha at the station. Evident in her smile, Chef Samantha said warmly, "I really appreciate your help." Mr. Huxley felt a warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in the kitchen for a long time. He glanced over at Marcus, who gave him an approving nod. As the weeks passed, Mr. Huxley began to feel more and more at ease in the kitchen. Marcus noticed changes in himself, and he found himself looking forward to coming to work, eager to collaborate with the diverse team that he had assembled. The kitchen was filled with laughter and camaraderie, which was a far cry from the tense atmosphere that he had once constructed. One day, as they were planning the menu for an upcoming event, Marcus turned to Mr. B. Huxley. "What are your thoughts on the possibility of introducing some fusion dishes? I was thinking that we might combine some traditional French methods with tastes from other cuisines." In the past, Mr. Huxley would have laughed at such a concept, but today he finds himself interested by the idea. He thinks it sounds fascinating. Marcus grinned at him, and Mr. Huxley felt a feeling of pride that he hadn't had in years. He recognized that under Marcus's supervision, he was regaining his enthusiasm for cooking. Marcus beamed at him. Mr. Huxley added, "I'm surprised that we could start with a twist on cocoa van using some Asian spices." Mr. Huxley found himself fully embracing the restaurant's new ethos as they worked together to create the new menu. He began to see the strength and diversity of the restaurant, as well as the beauty and collaboration of the restaurant, and the joy that existed in the process of nurturing young talent. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus and Mr. Huxley worked side by side, worked together to breathe new life into El Grand Epicurean. The process was difficult, but their combined passion started to show results. One beautiful day, they sat at a corner table surrounded by papers and menu drafts. Marcus glanced up from his notes with a gleam in his eyes and said, "What if we were to do this? Please include a section for seasonal specialties." He noted that it may highlight local products and help to maintain a sense of freshness. Mr. Huxley nodded thoughtfully and said, "That is an excellent idea. We could rotate the dishes every month." Our regulars, something new to look forward to while they talked the menu modifications. Marcus noted a difference in Mr. Huxley's manner. The elder chef's face had softened, and there was a renewed excitement in his voice. It was a long cry from the harsh, uncompromising guy he had. Previously, the staff also started to notice the shift. The kitchen, which had been a source of stress and dread, was now buzzing with joyful energy. Chefs from a variety of backgrounds brought their own distinct viewpoints to the table, which resulted in a combination of tastes that differentiated Le Grand Epicurean from other restaurants. Restaurants in the city. Marcus convened the staff for a meeting one evening as the dinner service was winding down. He stated, in a voice filled with affection, "I want to thank all of you for your hard work. We've come a long way, and it's because of your dedication and commitment." Creativity. Mr. Huxley walked up, clearing his throat, and said, "I would like to say something as well." His voice was surprisingly timid as he stated, "I know I wasn't the easiest person to work with in the past, but thanks to Marcus's leadership and your patience, I've learned so much, thank you." Marcus observed as Mr. Huxley's face wrined with a little grin tugging at his lips as news traveled about the improvements at LRCNCI. The audience went hushed for a minute, then erupted in applause. Marcus thanked Mr. Huxley for giving me a second opportunity. Diners started coming back, and when they did, they were met with a warm and friendly ambiance, as well as a menu that astonished and thrilled them. The restaurant's reputation began to develop not just for its cuisine, but also for its inclusive and innovative approach to finding eating. As the weeks went by, the restaurant's reputation continued to expand. His harsh demands gradually evolved into gentle counsel, and his critical glares gave way to encouraging nods one day. The crew at El Grand Epicurean began to note subtle changes in Mr. Huxley's behavior. He had been a stern and unapproachable head chef in the past, but he began to soften around the edges. During a particularly hectic lunch service, Aisha, a young sous chef, dropped a tray of appetizers by mistake. She paused, expecting Mr. Huxley to give her the typical severe rebuke. Instead, he approached her in a calm manner and said, "It's okay, Aisha. These things happen. Let's clean this up together and start fresh." The kitchen fell silent, everyone stunned by Mr. Huxley's unexpected kindness. Aisha's eyes welled up with grateful tears as she and Mr. Huxley worked side by side to clean the mess. As Mr. Huxley's transformation continued, the staff began to feel more at ease in his presence. They started to share ideas more freely, knowing that their input would be valued rather than dismissed. The atmosphere in the kitchen shifted from tense and competitive to collaborative and supportive during a staff meeting. Mr. Lully surprised everyone by asking for feedback on his management style. "I am aware that I have not always been the easiest person to work with," he stated that his voice was tinged with sorrow. "But I'm dedicated to doing better. Please tell me how I can improve." The room was silent at first, but slowly staff members began to open up. They shared their experiences and offered recommendations, and Mr. Huxley was able to contribute to the conversation. Listened attentively, taking notes, and asking meaningful questions as Mr. Huxley's discriminatory attitudes began to fade away. The diversity in the kitchen flourished. Chefs from a variety of backgrounds felt empowered to bring their own distinctive culinary perspectives to the table, and the menu evolved to incorporate a beautiful fusion of flavors and ingredients. Techniques that reflected the rich tapestry of the staff's experiences. The positive changes in the work environment were palpable. Laughter could often be heard echoing through the kitchen. The staff began to socialize outside of work hours. They organized potluck dinners, where everyone brought a dish that represented their heritage. The staff began to socialize outside of work hours. Marcus and Mr. Huxley sat in the peaceful office of L.R. Epicurean, where the evening sun shed a pleasant light through the windows. The busy noises of the kitchen had gone away as the last of the staff members left home after another. This helped them develop a greater understanding and admiration for each other's cultures. Marcus sat back in his chair with a contemplative look on his face. "You know, Mr. H. Lay, I never imagined that we'd be sitting here like this," he remarked in a voice that was gentle and reflective. Mr. Huxley nodded with a trace of a smile on his normally stoic face. "Stern face, neither did I, Marcus. I've learnt more in these last few months than I have in my whole career." Marcus observed, the older man observing the changes in his manner. Gone was the cold, dismissive attitude that had formerly characterized him. In its stead was a guy who looked to be more at one with himself and his surroundings, himself and others. "I've seen such progress in you," Marcus remarked. His tone was warm and encouraging. "The way you've accepted change, how you've begun to truly listen to the staff." It's been great to see Mr. Huxley's eyes meet Marcus's words. Marcus's words were warm and encouraging. "Due to the fact that I was blinded by my own biases and concerns, I owe you an apology, Marcus. The way I treated you in the past was wrong. I am overwhelmed with a mixture of appreciation and sorrow. I owe you an apology." He apologized, saying, "We all make mistakes, Mr. Huxley. What matters is how we learn from them. I believe in second chances, and you have surely shown that you are deserving of one." A comfortable stillness fell between them as they both pondered on their journey. Mr. Huxley broke the silence when he said, "I believe in second chances. voice brimming with emotion. "Your kindness in granting me this job, it has taught me so much about leadership and humility." Marcus smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "That's what partnerships are about. Learning from each other, developing together. We may have even had a chance to learn from one another. I believe that we began as adversaries, but I believe that we have discovered something that is much more valuable." Mr. Huxley nodded in agreement. "And I never thought that I would say this, but I am proud to work alongside you, Marcus. Your vision for this restaurant, your commitment to inclusivity and respect, it is inspiring." As they continued to talk about their experiences. As the weeks went by, the restaurant El Grand Epicurean began to undergo a transformation under the joint leadership of Marcus and Mr. Huxley. The conversation flowed easily, touching on new menu ideas, staff development, and future plans for the restaurant. The mutual respect that existed between them was evident in every word and gesture. Known for its stuffy atmosphere and traditional fare, now buzzed with a new energy that patrons couldn't help but know. Notice word spread quickly through the city about the changes at El Epicurean. Curious diners who had stayed away during Mr. Huxley's reign began to trickle back, drawn by rumors of innovative dishes and a welcoming. Yet they were pleasantly delighted by what they discovered on the menu, which now offered a perfect blend of traditional French cuisine and contemporary twists inspired by Marcus's heritage dishes like as coq au vin with African spices and ratatouille fuson, which were fast favorites. Favorites that highlighted the one-of-a-kind combination between Marcus and Mr. Huxley. But it wasn't only the food that kept people coming back. The crew, which had been uptight and afraid in the past, now worked with a sense of joy and purpose. Servers welcomed diners with genuine grins, and the kitchen was a place where people looked forward to coming back. Frequent customers, such as Mrs. Thompson, who had been going to El Grand Epicurea for years, couldn't stop talking about the improvements. She told her friends over lunch one day that it's like a breath of fresh air. The establishment was buzzing with good energy, and customers could feel the difference as soon as they came through the door. As word spread about the restaurant's revival, it started to gain attention from food critics and local media. A wonderful article in the city's most prominent daily lauded not just the great cuisine, but also the staff. "The food is better than it has ever been, and everyone appears to be so delighted to be here." Inspiring story of redemption and unity behind the restaurant's transformation. Soon El Grand Epicurean became more than just a place to eat. It became a symbol of what was possible when people put aside their differences and worked together. Community leaders pointed to Marcus and Mr. Huxley's partnership as an example of good change, and the restaurant started sponsoring events that highlighted diversity and inclusiveness in the culinary world. For Marcus and Mr. Huxley, it was very exciting to watch their vision come to life, and they often stood side by side in the kitchen working in tandem. Perfect harmony to create dishes that delighted their guests. The mutual respect between them was evident to everyone who watched them work, and it set the tone for the entire restaurant. Marcus's journey from a chef who was wrongfully dismissed to a successful restaurateur began to capture hearts beyond the city limits. His story of how he went from being a chef to being a successful restaurateur began to capture hearts beyond the city limits. During the dissemination of local news, the concepts of resiliency, forgiveness, and triumph over hardship struck a chord with individuals from all walks of life. The uplifting story of Grand Epicurean's metamorphosis was first brought to the attention of several publications. On a sunny morning, Marcus got a call from a well-known morning show which expressed interest in include him in a piece regarding local success stories at the time. Initially, Marcus was anxious about the prospect of appearing on television. However, Angela pushed him to talk about his experiences. Narrative. The day of the interview arrived, and Marcus found himself seated in the studio, surrounded by brilliant lights, while the cameras were rolling. He spoke from the heart about his experiences, including the agony of disc incrimination and the hardship to get a job. Rolled, he spoke about his experiences, work, and the unanticipated chance that altered everything. But most crucially, the most vital thing. It would have been possible for me to harbor resentment, but he stressed the power of forgiveness and second opportunities. However, I made the decision to forgive Marcus, despite the fact that his voice was full with passion, and go on, and that choice created doors that I could not have imagined opening up. In the event that the piece was shown, Marcus's phone started to get an excessive amount of responses. Ringing off the line with messages of support and appreciation, individuals from all across the nation reached out to share their thoughts and expressing their gratitude. Because of the impact that his narrative had on them, invites began to come in from the community. Marcus was invited to speak at events hosted by business groups, and culinary schools requested that he address their students. In the beginning, Marcus was apprehensive about the possibility of his serving as a keynote speaker at even a few significant national conferences. He was merely a chef who liked to cook, and he was not a public speaker. But when he started to accept these compliments, he became overwhelmed by the attention. Marcus was aware of the influence that his remarks may have at each and every occasion that he was invited to. As he talked on the significance of endurance in the face of hardship, he recounted his experiences in an honest and humble manner. The significance of being loyal to one's passion and the transformational power of forgiveness, his remarks struck a chord with a great deal of resonance, with his listeners often exiting the room with nary a single dry eye as Marcus stood in the crowd. The bustling energy of the workers preparing for another busy evening in the kitchen of his flagship restaurant, which is surrounded by the vibrant activity of the personnel. He paused for a while to think on the incredible journey that had led him to this point, where the sparkling surfaces and the other elements were shining. The modest diner where he had worked in the past, where he had struggled to make ends meet, was quite different from the state-of-the-art equipment that he possessed now. As he looked out the window, he caught a glimpse of El Grand Epicuria, which is across the street and is the only restaurant that is now suffering. The organization flourished under the combined leadership of both him and Mr. Huxley, and it served as a demonstration of the efficacy of forgiveness and second chances. Marcus discovered that Angela had gently touched him on the shoulder, and he turned around to see her. She questioned him with a smile on her face, her eyes gleaming with excitement as she smiled up at him. As he shook his head in agreement, he pulled her into a loving hug, all the while contemplating how far she had come. He whispered, "We've arrived. I never in a million years would have anticipated that I would be sacked from my job." Mr. Huxley walked as if he were on cue, being an Epicurean. When the two men entered the kitchen, his chef whites were pristine and spotless, and they shared a nod of agreement. "We have a full house tonight, and we appreciate each other and their prior disagreements, which have long ago been addressed." It was with a tinge of enthusiasm in his voice that Mr. Huxley made the announcement, and that culinary reviewer from. When Marcus saw that the times had returned, he smiled and felt an overwhelming sense of thankfulness for the community that had gathered around him at his most difficult time. He recalled the charitable organization, Cook-Off, which had rekindled his interest in the culinary arts. A critic who had believed in him, as well as the other persons who had supported his ambition along the road as he prepared for it. As the evening service began, Marcus took a moment to glance around at the many faces of his crew, which served as a mirror of the inclusive culture. The atmosphere that he had worked so diligently to establish, he came to the realization that his restaurants were more than merely successful. Those enterprises were shining examples of hope, demonstrating that compassion and honesty could prevail over prejudice and discrimination, challenged with a profound feeling of satisfaction. Marcus grabbed up his chef's knife and started to prepare anything was on his mind and in his heart. If you were in Marcus's position, would you have been able to forgive Mr. Huxley out of appreciation for the path that had taken him to this place? If you answered yes or no, please let me know in the comment section below. I would be very interested in hearing your opinion, as well as whether or not you found the video enjoyable. I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to my channel, since I am now devoting countless hours to write these uplifting tales for you. I am grateful to you.